Hello, my darling. This is a new books video, and I wanted so bad to do it that I actually carried all the books I wanted to talk to you about in my suitcase when I got back to London. Bear with me, there's so many of them. I'm going to talk really fast because the Italian version of this recorded 58 minutes. So I'm going to try and do better. Anyway, the first book that I want to talk to you about is a very old short story by Dean Koontz. Came out in 1970. It's called Anti-Man. And if you like some Asimov-y take on the android slash future issue, this might do just about to one half of the book, because after that it somehow gets lost in the otherworldly new agey feeling that Dean Koontz often falls for. I've read 3 other books by him. 2 I loved. 1998 for Fear Nothing and 1999 Seize the Night. It was a very short, self-contained saga, and I loved the story and the characters. But then again, I read Odd Thomas 2003, and I really didn't like that one. Anti-Man to me suffers the same effect. The idea that by the end everything needs to be kissed better. Like, no matter how badly we were wounded, somehow we have to survive, and we have to survive even better than the way we started. I'm not saying that I need to suffer all the way through a book, but I don't want to be fooled into thinking that everything is going to be alright no matter what. This is another book that to some people fools. It's public. It's the Facebook effect. It's not the one that inspired the movie. That one is The Accidental Billionaires, came out in 2009. This is a book written by someone who actually loves Facebook. And I love Facebook. I'd spend my whole day on it. I adore Facebook. It changed the world to me. But in this book, Zuckerman comes through as someone who genuinely believes in the power of transparency in order to make the world a better place. And the author goes as far as saying that Facebook might actually work with politics in making world peace possible. Again, I love Facebook, but I don't expect miracles out of it. Apparently, and I'm not really surprised, this book is not objective and doesn't tell the whole true story about Facebook because, again, the author really loves it. The problem is this one gives such a one-sided view of the story that it leaves the reader wondering which details have been left out. I mean, he doesn't even go through the effort of saying those little scenes that we all know about that Mark did in the first days, in the beginning of the history of Facebook. So again, makes the reader suspicious. What are you hiding from me? Well, they say history is written by the victors. Well, here it is. I'm always skeptical when it comes to new Sherlock Holmes books. This one is sort of a new series. It's called The Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. There's tons of these. There was also a BBC Radio 4 16 episodes called the same, ranging from 2002 to 2010. Anyway, Giant Rat of Sumatra. I started this book, I just ran across it last time I went to Forbidden Planet. I saw this and I thought, I am so gonna rip you apart. And I didn't in the end somehow. It turned out not to be disappointing. It all starts from a tiny sentence that Sherlock utters in The Adventures of the Sussex Vampire, and that's one of the 56 short stories that compose the canon. In that particular short story, Sherlock Holmes says that the world was not ready yet for the story of the giant rat of Sumatra, and his loyal friend obviously complied up to now, because this is the real account of what actually happened. The good thing about this book is that it's completely in character. It's exciting enough for the modern reader. It has a sense of period. You recognize the characters. You don't feel like they're miscast or anything. There's just one teeny tiny flaw, and that's page 62. To me, that's a huge mistake in Holmesian deduction. Maybe that's just me. In case you've read this, please go to page 62 and check line... Well, the last 4 lines of page 62 and so on and so on. I think there's a mistake. It's about a metal door. But anyway, if you can't have enough of Sherlock Holmes, I'd give this one a try. Somehow, when I lay down the research for these sorts of videos, and let's not be influenced by the serious word research, because the whole research that I do is writing down notes on yellow pad paper and maybe the dates when the books come out. But anyway, I find there's some sort of theme going through the lot of books that I've selected for that video, which is strange because I normally just waltz around in a bookshop in a daze and pick books almost at random. I wonder if it's, I don't know, if the theme comes later on once I see the titles, or if it's subconscious. Anyway, the next two books that I want to talk to you about somehow spring from the same basis. I'll start from the one that I liked less. I bought this because there was a conundrum. The title is great and the cover is not. I mean, to me, the picture on the cover is a big no-no, but the title not only sounds nice, but then you stop and think it actually makes sense. The title is witty and to me says a lot about the book, because in fact, the story does alternate between sadness and happiness. The story is rather blatant. It's about a young boy moving to a new city and meeting new people. Some of them he loves, some of them he doesn't fully understand. And then tragedy strikes. And the lives of those who were there to witness this tragedy are forever changed. And then the book is divided between what happened at the time and what happens to the same characters once they grow up. I like books that tend to extend over long periods of time. I like when an author tries to make sense out of lives, maybe because, just like Mark Twain said, the difference between life and fiction is that fiction has to make sense. The problem is that the bits where the characters are young feel far-fetched and artificial. Maybe just like with memories. You know, when you don't fully recall something and you try to make up for the lost bits and it sort of feels fake. That's the same feeling that this one gave me. The good thing about this book is that mainly it's about grief. Again, coming of age, it's a journey through life. It's delightful at times. As I said, it's between weeping and laughter. And you do get to laugh, or maybe to smile. But the levels of empathy that these characters can generate, especially in moments of grief, is so deep that the sadness they generate in you, it's hard to shed. So if the point is swerving on a dime between sadness and hilarity, you dwell on sadness a lot after you've closed this book. All in all, though, is very well written, especially when his characters are lost dealing with impossible questions and, again, huge grief. When facing something really, really hard, that's when they get at their best. Because you get the same feeling. I hope you've never really felt it, but deep grief is like when you're hit by something and at first you don't really feel the pain, you're just numb and you see what's happening around you, but you can't really make sense out of it. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but anyway, in this book is great. The depiction of that moment feels like a stream of consciousness. You're actually there and you're sad though. So don't underestimate this book and don't think it's just going to be a pleasurable reading. Starting more or less from the same premises, this is finally Looking for Alaska by John Green. As usual, if you don't know who John Green is, stop this video and go and watch his. I'll put the link to the last one in the doobly-doo. This one came out in 2000 and... I'm not sure if 2005 or 2003. Wait a second. 2005. Okay. Basically, again, starts from the same path. It's a young boy, it's just fresh out of high school, goes to college, meets new people. Some of them he loves, some of them he doesn't understand. Rings a bell. Tons of books I alone have spoken about start like this. Think of Starter for 10. And it has some moments in common with Starter for 10, especially the fact that our main character is awkward and insecure and often uncomfortable. Alaska, alas, the girl is not. People are influenced and shocked by Alaska, and she takes pride in this. She's an easy girl to fall in love with. There's a very funny controversy that started with this book, and I suggest you go and look at the blog that John did himself about the matter. I'll put, again, link in the doobly-doo. I personally think John Green is genius. He writes things and speaks in a way that normal human beings can only define as staggering. Can we go through a books video without talking about Neil Gaiman? I think not. And this time, I want to talk about American Gods. This one has been recently described to me as fantasy shit by someone who knows a lot about fantasy shit. American Gods was originally written between 1999 and 2001. And then a limited edition with the original untrimmed text came out. And this is the one you're gonna get here. You get 12,000 words, more than the original version, maybe the one you've read. If you decide to purchase this, you get a foreword by Neil himself who explains the whole editorial adventures of the text, and it's quite funny. I adore American Gods because the story springs from a very simple and clever idea. America is this huge and vast world. Suddenly, so many people arrived there from so many different places, some of them out of their own will, some of them taken there as slaves. As a baggage, they carried with them all they believed in, all they worshipped, all they loved. What happened to those gods once America was born, once Americans were born? This is what happened to those gods. And you might wonder what they survive on. Well, they survive on worshipping, and they're forgotten. They're angry and they're starving. The main character, a man named Shadow, who looks nothing like what you could imagine a man like Shadow would look, finds himself entangled in these actions. And even though he's sometimes too distracted to realize what's happening around him, you don't feel superior to him. It's not like when you see a horror movie and you see the blonde girl doing something really, really stupid and you'd like to shout at her, "Don't go there, it's obvious the killer is hiding X," whatever. You don't, I personally didn't feel like that with Shadow ever. It's not that he doesn't see sometimes, it's that he doesn't even look because he is shocked, because he is distracted again. What happens around him is a war of the worlds. And since this book is a journey, and a battle, not only shows you where you're going, but it also suggests you who you should go with. Every time I talk about Douglas Adams, Wodehouse comes up, and I think I've also named him quite briefly in one of the last videos. So anyway, I wanted to show you this. This is the crime wave at Blandings. Wodehouse is particularly famous for two series of short stories and novels, The Jeeves and The Blandings Castle. This one came out in 1936. It's a short story, appeared first in the US in two parts and then in 1937 in the UK. It's a rewritten version of an older piece entitled Creatures of Instinct, and it always appears in anthologies or best-ofs of Wodehouse because it's classic, because you find either your well-known characters if you already love them, or it's a great start if you want to fall in love with them. By the by, did you know that he was called Plum by most family and friends? Just like American Gods, this book came out in 1989, I mean not date-wise, but the point is that in 2010 it got a new edition with a foreword and some bits and pieces added here and there. If you Google this book, you might find it written with an E instead of a Y, so I'm not going to venture and try and read it. I'll just go with The Chemical Wedding because I'm afraid I might pronounce this wrong. Anyway, it's about 6 people in 2 different eras who find themselves woven together and connected. It's about alchemy, fate, obsession, love, passion, and the occult. And there are several dark moments and characters, but somehow it sheds a light on the mood of the book. It's wistful rather than tormented, and in doing so, I think it's very British. Sometimes the alchemical elements take over, and maybe there's a little bit too much dwelling on them. You get into these didactic passages, deep thoughts, superb descriptive writing, granted, but I think many would find them quite hard, just like What happens with the first 60 pages of The Lord of the Rings? You know, when people say, oh, no, nothing happens, it just describes, I mean, it could go on describing a leaf for 120 pages. That's exactly the point. Nothing happens. Everything is shown and not told. Things don't happen for very long periods of time, so sometimes it may be tiring. All in all, is a book that I found entertaining through the whole hermetic humbug, but it's slightly ambitious, and I suggest you read it if you're already interested in alchemy or if you're willing to read a lot about it. I wasn't sure I hadn't already talked about this one, and I had to hail for help on Facebook. Apparently I haven't, so here's The Terrible Privacy of Maxwells Sim by Jonathan Coe. Maxwells Sim, I've read on, I think it was a review by The Guardian, is the kind of Englishman created in the secret underground laboratories of the Daily Express. This book is a journey, and it's a mixture of disaster and revelation. The good thing is that somehow coincidence and changes in points of views somehow cooperate with randomness and create and or fit a pattern. The problem, to me personally, is that the learning curve is the kind where experience is for something, but the narrative leads to it, to the understanding, in such an obvious way that it's too predictable. It's all about being lonely and isolated in a time when potentially we're all linked to one another. But through the book, what at the beginning is a sharp picture gets blurry and vacuous and implausible. And it's true, unfortunately, that there are things that don't really work with this novel. Still, it's engaging because of how he writes. I'm really afraid when an author is not, in my view, again, as usual, this is my point of view, is not able to tame a story into an appropriate ending. And since this one came out in 2010, I'm slightly worried. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm really keen on hearing your thoughts if you have already read it, if you decide to. Because yes, I found it brilliant, but personally it gets lost along the way. I think this is the first time I talk about a play and not a novel. This is Tom Stoppard and this is Arcadia. It came out in 1993. It's acclaimed as one of the best play and playwriters of our era. It's about the relationship between past and present, order versus disorder, the certainty of knowledge, the consequences on the future of actions of the past. It's a drama in the modern sense of being somewhere between a tragedy and a comedy with very epigrammatic dialogue. It's so witty, and sometimes if you squint, it may remind you of those moments when Wilde is so cynical, he gets tender. It's the scene 1, act 1, so really I'm not spoiling anything. But it made me fall for this play instantly. There's this girl asking her tutor about what actually is a sexual congress. And obviously her tutor tries, it's 1909, so the tutor tries to stir away from the subject. And so tries and goes, there's nothing more to be said about sexual congress. Is it the same as love? And the tutor answers, oh no, it's much nicer than that. Nick Hornby is also often in this sort of videos. This is 31 songs. Came out in 2002 and it's actually a collection of 26 essays. It's because sometimes multiple songs are discussed in single entry, so actually it's 31 songs. It's about the intimate impact they have on him. It got a few CDs made out of it, a standalone CD in the UK. It's a selection from the music of 31 songs, there's 18 of them. And also came out a hardcover edition called Songbook. It was published by McSweeney's. It included a CD with 11 of the songs mentioned in the book. And I'll also put a link in the doobly-doo, because McSweeney's site accepted online submissions from authors writing about their favourite songs. You can find them on the website still. I've read many different reviews about this book, mainly because I suspect I'm not really objective. Nick Hornby could talk to me about anything. As long as he does it the way he writes, it's fine. I would buy anything from him. Is it my mistake? I'm not sure. I've read of someone who says all the choices that he makes in this book are really, really easy. And that sometimes he claims what he loved when he was a boy was sort of guilty pleasures. Others said that he is quite open about his guilty pleasures. Think about Nelly Furtado and the attitude that he has towards pop music. I'm personally not sure where I stand. I do think there might be the hint of a midlife crisis into this. The feeling that the minute his wife and children are out of the door, a Led Zeppelin album plays, and the minute he can hear them coming back, he puts on a much safer Beatles album, and before they went to India and started taking drugs in public. And if I want to be extremely cynical, maybe not everyone knows about Nick Hornby, but everyone knows about that guy who makes top tens out of everything. And look, he wrote a book about songs. Shall we buy it? Let's. But I think music sometimes, like politics and religion, is a risky business. And if you start and discuss it with people you don't particularly like, love and know, again, it's a risky terrain. I suggest if you decide to read this, or you already have, just remember how much you like Nick Hornby and treat him like a friend. So let's try and not be that judgmental about his musical taste. I caved in and bought the new Ian McEwan book. It's Solar, came out in 2010. It's a satire about a Nobel-winning physicist whose personal life is seriously messed up, and his ambition towards solar energy-based solutions for climate change are cynical. Somehow, he's not someone who's actually worried about the future of the planet because he's not going to be around anyway. This is someone who happens to mistake love and a heart attack because the symptoms are the same to him. Michael Bird is a despicable human being with unparalleled levels of self-indulgence. When he deems himself to be right, there's nothing that can stop him. Somehow, I don't feel sympathetic towards him. He is a despicable human being, and he doesn't go as far as to turn things around and make himself lovable in a way. No, you actually despise him the whole time. The book promised to be funny. Is it funny? Just like the cover suggests? Yes, but personally I feel like it tries really, really hard to be funny. And in that way, I try and play cool about it and don't laugh openly. When I first saw this book, I thought, really, again, you're gonna fall for a pretty cover. So I tried and resist, but then I found out it was a biographical novel about Herbert George Wells, so I had to give in. David Lodge follows him in his period of greater influence. And mischief, maybe, between the publication of The Time Machine in 1895 and when the author was 29, by the by, what have you done today with your life? And Outline of History came out in 1919. The point is that we find the man 2 years from his death, old and maybe slightly disenchanted, talking to a voice in his head. The voice in his head may be himself from the past, from a different point in his life. This voice he answers to conducts some sort of interview inside his head, while another voice speaks in a more expansive way of his life and loves. Frequent sex scenes may be found throughout the book, and Wells is depicted as a champion in birth control techniques. His attitude to women is one of tender playfulness. And he was, after all, regarded as an influential feminist, although he was much more concerned with free love and the right to free love than the right to vote. But then again, free love was demanding work and someone had to do it. He wasn't the most alluring of men, apparently, small, fattish, domineering and opinionated, but somehow women just kept coming. There is no trace of his notorious irascibility. Instead, you find good humor and patience, and you start wondering if maybe he actually got to that point the minute he got older and maybe tried to come to terms with himself, or was he really the prophet of his age? The point is, this Wells that you find in this book is slightly two-dimensional, probably looking down from that literary pinnacle where an author continued to be published and bought but ceased to be read. I personally think the most intriguing part of this book is the consideration that the author of the book, Mr. David Lodge, the fictional worlds that we find in here, the fictional worlds' voices that talk into this book, and the real worlds just merge in together, and all these voices talk. It's slightly crowded. So if even only for that, I suggest you read and pick the one you like the most. Okay, I did manage to keep this one slightly shorter than the Italian version. As usual, if you're interested in that one, you'll find it on Bluebeam's channel. I'll put the link in the doobly-doo. Thanks to a very dedicated viewer, that's Steffi2789, you now can find a list of the books that I mention in the doobly-doos of each video about books, so to me that is absolutely great. Additional information as usual, either about the books or regarding contacting me. If you decide to read anything I've mentioned, please let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!